Friends, fellow seekers of truth in the vast Star Wars saga, have you ever considered the quiet heroism? We often celebrate the explosive clashes, the galaxy-altering battles, the dramatic sacrifices made in the heat of conflict. We remember Luke staring down the Emperor, Leia's defiant spirit against the Death Star, and Obi-Wan's selfless duel with Vader. These are the moments etched in our collective memory, the operatic crescendos of a timeless tale. But what about the sacrifices unseen, the burdens carried in silence, day after relentless day? What if the truest measure of a Jedi's commitment wasn't in the blaze of glory, but in the unwavering endurance of a soul tested by constant adversity? Tonight, we turn our gaze to a figure whose heroism is often defined by his final act, a sacrifice etched in the very heart of the early rebellion, Kanan Jarrus. A Jedi Knight, survivor of the Purge, mentor to Ezra Bridger, and a vital pillar of the Ghost crew. We know him as a skilled warrior, a wise teacher, and a courageous leader. But beneath the surface of his stoic demeanor lies a tapestry of untold struggles, silent battles waged against fear, against the ghosts of his past, and against the ever-present threat of the Empire. We know the broad strokes of his story. Caleb Dume, the Padawan who witnessed the horrific betrayal of Order 66 and barely escaped with his life, thanks to the selfless act of his master, Depa Billaba. We know of his years spent in hiding, shedding his Jedi identity, living in the shadows, driven by the primal need to survive. We know of his reluctant return to the light, his mentorship of Ezra, and his crucial role in igniting the spark of rebellion in the Lothal sector. But what of the weight he carried during those long, dark years? What were the internal battles fought in the silence of his exile? How did the constant fear of discovery shape his character? What were the sacrifices he made, not in grand confrontations, but in the quiet, everyday act of denying his true self for the sake of survival? Think about it. To be a Jedi, a guardian of peace and justice, and then to be forced to abandon everything you believe in, to suppress the very essence of who you are, must have been a torment beyond measure. Imagine the constant vigilance, the paranoia, the gnawing fear that every shadow held an Imperial agent, every casual acquaintance a potential betrayer. This wasn't a momentary sacrifice. It was a daily erosion of his former life, a constant wearing down of his spirit. And then, when Ezra entered his life, Kanan was forced to confront his past once more. The decision to take on a Padawan was not made lightly. It was a profound responsibility, a conscious choice to re-expose himself to the very dangers he had spent years trying to evade. He had to not only teach Ezra the ways of the Force, but also grapple with his own incomplete training, his own lingering trauma from the Purge. He had to be a mentor while still battling the ghosts of his own shattered apprenticeship. Consider the emotional burden of guiding a young, headstrong Padawan while constantly fearing that the Empire would discover their existence. Every lesson, every training session, every mission carried the weight of potential annihilation. Kanan couldn't afford a single mistake, for the consequences would be catastrophic, not just for himself, but for Ezra and the burgeoning rebellion. Tonight, we seek to delve deeper into these untold struggles. We aim to explore the silent sacrifices that forged Kanan Jarrus into the unwavering spirit we came to admire. We will examine the emotional scars of Order 66, the constant pressure of living in hiding, and the immense responsibility of guiding a new generation of Force users in a galaxy teeming with peril. This isn't just about recounting his known story, it's about illuminating the unseen battles, the internal fortitude, the quiet heroism that defined his journey. It's about understanding that true strength isn't always loud and explosive. Sometimes it's the silent, persistent endurance of a soul carrying a heavy burden for the greater good. Join us as we unravel the mysteries surrounding Kanan Jarrus's untold struggles. Let us explore the depths of his commitment, the resilience of his spirit, and the profound sacrifices he made in the quiet corners of the galaxy. prepare to see the hero we thought we knew in a new light, to appreciate the true weight of his journey, and to understand that sometimes the greatest Jedi sacrifices are indeed the silent burdens carried day after day, forging an unwavering spirit that ultimately ignites the flames of hope. Tonight, we explore the untold story of Kanan Jarrus, a testament to the quiet power of enduring sacrifice. We turn our gaze to the harrowing origin of the hero we know as Kanan Jarrus, a story of profound loss, agonizing isolation, and the unyielding burden that would forge his unwavering spirit. This is the tale of the Last Padawan. The Last Padawan, the weight of the purge. We often recall Order 66 as a moment of galaxy-wide cataclysm, a single, devastating blow that extinguished the light of the Jedi. But for young Caleb Dume, it was not a grand event. It was an intimate, bloody betrayal. He was a boy, no more than a young man, standing on a battlefield with his master, Depa Billaba. They were Jedi, and their companions, the clone troopers, were their brothers in arms. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The order: execute. Order 66 was a whispered sentence that tore a hole in his reality, turning his loyal allies into relentless, murderous hunters. Picture the scene. The flash of blaster bolts, the sickening thud of a fallen friend, and the cold, unseen eyes of those who had once sworn fealty to the Republic. For Caleb, this was a moment of profound trauma, a shattering of his belief in order and justice. He saw the very foundation of his life crumble before his eyes as his master, in a final act of selfless heroism, held off the clones just long enough for him to flee. This was not a moment of heroic defiance for Caleb. It was an act of raw survival, a frantic, terrified flight into the unknown. The philosophical ideal of the Jedi, the very principles of peace and enlightenment, were reduced to a desperate, primal scramble for life. At T.S. Eliot wrote, "Between the idea and the reality falls the shadow." And for Caleb, the shadow of that betrayal would follow him for years. He was not just a survivor of a war, he was a witness to a genocide. A child burdened with the memory of the Jedi Order's last breaths. He was a boy who had to run not from an enemy army, but from a trusted friend, a terrifying paradox that would define his every choice from that moment forward. The Last Padawan, a life in the shadows. To survive, Caleb Dume had to die. He had to shed every visible and spiritual vestige of his identity as a Jedi Padawan. The Padawan braid, a sacred symbol of his commitment and lineage, was unceremoniously cut. The lightsaber, the elegant weapon of a civilized age, was abandoned. But the hardest sacrifice was the one he carried within, the constant, gnawing need to suppress his connection to the Force. He had to become small, unremarkable, a ghost in a galaxy teeming with life. He became Kanan Jarrus, a name without a history, a man without a home, a wanderer on the fringes. This was not a glorious exile. It was a life of quiet desperation, as Ovid wrote in his Metamorphoses. A transformation can be both a gift and a curse. For Kanan, the metamorphosis from Jedi to commoner was a grim necessity. He lived on the razor's edge, every flicker of emotion, every instinctive pull of the Force, a potential death sentence. He likely took on countless odd jobs, associating with smugglers, bounty hunters, and the kind of people who asked no questions. This wasn't just about hiding, it was about unlearning. He had to unlearn the posture of a guardian, the openness of a Jedi, the trust in a benevolent universe. The very essence of his being, a spirit attuned to the Force, had to be locked away in a prison of his own making. In this life on the fringes, he learned about the galaxy in a way the Jedi Order never could. He saw the suffering of ordinary people, the corruption of a triumphant empire, and the desperation that drove good people to do bad things. This period of his life, though dark, was a crucial part of his education, shaping his worldview and preparing him for the role he would eventually play. He became a man of the people, not a high-minded Jedi, and that would be his greatest strength. The Last Padawan, the weight of the fallen. The ghost of Depa Billaba, his master, haunted him. Her sacrifice was not a distant memory. It was a living, breathing part of him, a constant reminder of the life he owed her and the promise he was unable to keep. He was the one who survived, and with that survival came the gnawing guilt of the one who got away. Did he not fight hard enough? Could he have saved her? These are the questions that would plague him in the silence of his isolation. The silent battles waged in the privacy of his own mind. His guilt was a manifestation of survivor's remorse, a psychological weight as heavy as any physical burden. The death of his master was not just a historical event. It was a personal failure he had to live with every single day. His responsibility was not just to himself, but to the Jedi Order he was a part of, however briefly. He was a living remnant of a dead lineage, and with that came the unspoken duty to carry on its legacy. He held in his heart not only the memory of his fallen master, but the collective hope of an entire generation of Jedi who were violently cut down. It was a crushing burden, a shadow that he could never truly outrun. This period, the Last Padawan, was the crucible in which Kanan Jarrus was forged. The trauma of Order 66, the isolation of his exile, and the crushing guilt of his master's sacrifice all combined to shape him into the man he would become. He was not a Jedi in the traditional sense, but in his unwavering spirit, his quiet resilience, and his profound compassion, he embodied the very best of what a Jedi could be. His journey into the light would not begin until he faced the ghosts of his past and found the courage to carry the weight of his survival, not just for himself, but for a new generation that would need his guidance. The desert wind howled a tune of forgotten dreams and hard-won lessons. For a Jedi, the Force was a guiding light, a cosmic compass. But for Kanan Jarrus, a scavenger on the fringes of the galaxy, survival was a different kind of discipline. This is the story of how a Jedi Knight's mind was reforged by the gritty realities of the street, how he learned to trust again, and how he found a family in the most unlikely of places. From Jedi discipline to street smarts. The Jedi Temple was a place of serene discipline, of focused meditation and formal instruction. Kanan, as a young Caleb Dume, was taught the elegant arts of lightsaber combat and the subtle, philosophical nuances of the Force. He was a student of the light, taught to see the world in clear lines of good and evil. But the universe is not so simple. The cold, brutal lesson of Order 66 taught him that. The years that followed transformed him from a Jedi Knight in training to a street-savvy survivor. He had to trade the flowing robes of a Jedi for the grimy clothes of a commoner. The Jedi Code was replaced by a new, unwritten law: keep your head down, trust no one, and always have an escape route. He became a man of few words, his mind a steel trap of information and quick calculations. As Niccolo Machiavelli wrote, "The ends justify the means." Kanan wasn't thinking of galactic justice. He was thinking about his next meal, his next safe place to sleep. His skills, once honed for noble purposes, were now applied to the art of survival. He learned how to hotwire a speeder, haggle with ruthless merchants, and read the subtle tells of a grimy underworld. His intuition, once used to sense the presence of the Force, was now a finely tuned instrument for sensing danger, for knowing when to fight and when to flee. The Jedi Temple taught him to look to the Force. The streets taught him to look over his shoulder. This was a different kind of training, a brutal but essential apprenticeship in the real world. It stripped him of the Jedi's high-minded detachment and gave him a grounded, pragmatic understanding of the people he was now living among. Learning to trust. Again, the deepest scar left by Order 66 was not a physical one. It was the chasm of distrust that had opened in his heart. The betrayal by the very soldiers he fought beside was so profound that it made him question the very concept of loyalty. For years, he was a solitary figure, a lone wolf with an invisible wall around him, a fortress of solitude built to protect himself from the pain of another betrayal. Trusting someone again was a slow, painful process, like trying to heal a wound that refused to close. But the universe has a way of placing unexpected people in your path. It began with Hera Syndulla, the green-skinned Twi'lek pilot with a fire in her eyes and a boundless faith in the fight against the Empire. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, a pragmatic idealist who saw the good in the galaxy even in its darkest hour. She was patient with his reluctance, his gruff demeanor, his constant need for an exit strategy. Her unshakable hope was a soft, steady rain on the parched earth of his soul, slowly eroding the walls he had built. Kanan's journey from solitude to companionship was not a straight line. It was filled with false starts, misgivings, and the constant temptation to retreat. But Hera's unwavering belief in a cause, and in him, was an irresistible force. She didn't demand his trust. She earned it, not with grand gestures, but with the quiet, persistent act of being there. It was a testament to the power of human connection, a concept that had seemed lost to him for so long, finding family in unexpected places. The Ghost was more than just a freighter. It was a home, and the crew was more than just a team. They were a family. This was a concept Kanan had thought he would never know again after the fall of the Jedi. The Jedi Order was a family, but one built on a shared philosophy and duty, not on the messy, beautiful reality of shared life. The Ghost crew was different. They were a motley group of misfits, bound not by a formal code, but by a shared purpose and a deep, genuine care for one another. There was Zeb, the loyal and gruff Lasat warrior who became his unexpected brother-in-arms. Sabine, the young Mandalorian artist who channeled her rebellious spirit into vibrant acts of defiance. And of course Ezra, the street urchin with a raw, untrained connection to the Force. Ezra was the one who truly shattered Kanan's solitude. The boy was a mirror, reflecting his own past as a lost and directionless youth. Taking on Ezra as his Padawan was the ultimate act of faith, a conscious decision to re-embrace his Jedi identity and the responsibilities that came with it. Kanan didn't just teach Ezra taught him. The boy's chaotic, unpredictable nature forced him to loosen his rigid control, to trust his instincts, and to connect with the Force in a way that was both ancient and new. He was no longer a lone survivor. He was a leader, a mentor, a father figure. He found in the Ghost crew a new kind of family, one born not of a grand institution, but of a shared struggle and an unshakable bond. As the poet Robert Frost wrote, home is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in. For Kanan Jarrus, the Ghost was his home. It was the place where he was no longer a survivor, but a family member. He had shed the Jedi's discipline and learned the street's pragmatism. He had overcome his distrust and found a new purpose. The Last Padawan had found a new life, a new family, and a new reason to fight. The Jedi may have been gone, but the spirit of hope, compassion, and justice lived on, carried not by an institution, but by a small, courageous band of rebels. The lightsaber is not just a weapon, it is a symbol. For the Jedi, it represents peace, justice, and the light side of the Force. But for Kanan Jarrus, it was a burden, a silent, humming weight that he carried not just on his belt, but in the deepest parts of his soul. This is the story of that burden, of the constant internal conflict, the immense pressure of mentorship, and the unyielding fear that defined his life as a Jedi in a post-Jedi galaxy. This is the tale of the burden of the blade, the internal conflict, a Jedi without an order. Kanan, as a young Padawan, was taught to live by these rules, to see the world through the lens of the Jedi Code. But when Order 66 shattered that world, he was left with the ideals, but without the structure. He was a Jedi without a temple, a knight without a council, a believer in a faith that had been declared a lie. This created a profound internal conflict. How does one remain true to an ideal when the organization that championed it has fallen to ruin? Kanan had to forge his own path, a path not found in any Jedi holocron. He had to decide what a Jedi truly was, separate from the robes and the titles. He had to be a protector without the authority to protect, a peacekeeper in a galaxy at war with itself. He was forced to reconcile the ancient, almost monastic teachings of the Jedi with the brutal, pragmatic realities of the streets. This internal struggle was his constant companion. He had to choose when to intervene and when to remain hidden. A traditional Jedi might have rushed to every cry for help, but Kanan, hardened by his years in hiding, understood the value of discretion. He was a force for good, but a silent one, a phantom of the old order, fighting a war he was never officially a part of. He was, in a sense, the living embodiment of the Force's will, acting on instinct and personal conviction rather than a council's decree. This was the burden of the blade, to carry the legacy of a fallen order without the support system that had sustained it for centuries. As the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster." Kanan had to navigate the moral gray areas of rebellion without losing his connection to the light, a constant balancing act that defined his very essence. Mentoring Ezra, the fear of failure. The lightsaber was a symbol of his past, and so was Ezra. When Kanan discovered the street urchin with a raw, powerful connection to the Force, he was forced to confront his own demons. Taking on a Padawan was not just a duty, it was a profound act of faith, a leap of courage into the very past he had tried so hard to outrun. But with that courage came an immense fear of failure. Kanan's own training was incomplete. He was a Padawan when his master fell, and he had to finish his education in the brutal school of survival. Now, he was the teacher. He was responsible for shaping a young, impressionable mind, for guiding a nascent Force user through a galaxy full of peril and temptation. He saw his own struggles reflected in Ezra's impulsiveness, his own impatience in Ezra's rash decisions. Every mistake Ezra made was a painful reminder of his own past, and a terrifying glimpse into a potential future where he, Kanan, had failed as a master. This was the core of his mentoring burden. He wasn't just teaching lightsaber forms, he was teaching a way of life. He was passing on a legacy that had almost been extinguished, a legacy he himself had almost forgotten. He feared that he was not enough, that he was an unworthy master, a flawed guardian. He had to teach Ezra to trust the Force, to trust in himself, and to trust in his master, all while grappling with his own profound trust issues. His love for Ezra was a powerful motivator, but it was also a source of constant anxiety. He knew that if he failed, it would not just be the end of Ezra, but the end of a hope for the future, a hope that was entrusted to him alone. The constant threat, the psychological toll. The weight of the blade was not just internal, it was external. The lightsaber on his belt was not a symbol of power, it was a target. For years, Kanan lived with the gnawing fear of discovery. Every Imperial patrol, every routine checkpoint, every curious glance from a stranger was a potential threat. He was a phantom, but one who knew that at any moment, the Empire's hounds would find his scent. This constant threat took a profound psychological toll. He couldn't trust anyone, not completely. He had to always be on guard, always ready to run, to fight, or to die. The paranoia was a silent, corrosive force, eating away at his peace of mind. He was a Jedi, meant to be at one with the Force, but he was constantly at war with his own anxieties. The peace he sought was always a step away, always just out of reach. His burden was amplified by the fact that he was not alone. The Ghost Crew was his family, but they were also his weakness. The love and loyalty he felt for them was his greatest strength, but also his greatest vulnerability. The Empire was not just hunting him, they were hunting them. The thought of his friends being captured, tortured, or killed because of his presence was a constant torment. He was a man who had already lost one family. He could not bear the thought of losing another. Ultimately, the burden of the blade was the burden of being a Jedi in a galaxy that no longer wanted one. It was the burden of carrying a legacy, of mentoring a future, and of living in a state of perpetual fear. But it was also the burden that forged him into the hero he was destined to be. It was in the face of this adversity, in the shadow of this constant threat, that Kanan Jarrus' spirit hardened, his faith deepened, and his commitment to the light became an unwavering fire. He may have carried the weight of the fallen, but in doing so, he became the living embodiment of the Jedi's enduring spirit, a testament to the idea that true heroism is not about avoiding the burden, but about finding the strength to carry it. All right, folks, buckle up and put on your comedy goggles, because we're about to talk about the most dramatic, over-the-top, and frankly, hilarious sacrifice in a galaxy far, far away. We've covered Kanan Jarrus's quiet struggles, his brooding angst, and the sheer amount of emotional baggage he carried around. Now, let's get to the good stuff, the grand finale, the heroic, but let's be honest, it's a bit much for a Tuesday moment. That was his big goodbye. This is sacrifice and legacy, and trust me, it's a blast. Literally, the ultimate decision. Because someone had to go. Look, we all know the story. The Empire has Sabine. A fuel depot is about to go full supernova, and everyone is having a very bad day. Ezra's being Ezra, which is to say, incredibly stubborn, and the stakes are higher than a Wookiee's blood pressure. Kanan, bless his heart, realizes what we all realize in these situations: someone has to be the hero, but not just any hero. The ultimate hero. So what does he do? Does he, just pull a lever and save everyone? Yo, that's too simple. Kanan decides to go for the full cinematic experience. He holds back an entire exploding fuel tank using nothing but the Force and his love for his family. I mean, talk about a mic drop. He's basically saying, you thought I was just a brooding, blind guy who could barely keep my Padawan from getting into trouble. Watch this. It's a masterclass in one-upmanship. He's not just saving them, he's giving a motivational speech for the rest of their lives. You know, kids, this is how you make a dramatic exit. Remember me every time you see an explosion? Or a mural. Definitely a mural. It's the single greatest piece of Jedi PR since Obi-Wan let Vader chop him up on the Death Star. He turned a terrible day into a legendary moment, and honestly, you have to respect the hustle. Blindness as clarity, the ultimate I told you so. Okay, now let's talk about the irony. We spent a whole chunk of Kanan's story watching him get blinded. He loses his sight, but then, magically, his connection to the Force becomes clearer. It's like the universe's most passive-aggressive joke. Oh, you needed to see with your eyes. Too bad. Now you have to really learn to see, and I'm going to make you better at it than you ever were before. No more cheating with those pesky eyeballs. He goes from stumbling around and needing Hera to guide him to literally being a Force ghost waiting to happen. He's able to see things he never could before, and his mind becomes sharper, his connection to the Force more profound. It's the ultimate. I told you so. To the Empire, to the Jedi Council, and to every jerk who ever underestimated him. You took my sight? Wow, thanks. Now I'm on a first-name basis with the cosmic energy field of all life. He became more powerful, more centered, and more in tune with the Force, all because some jerk with a lightsaber took his vision. It's a hilarious and deeply satisfying cosmic punchline. He's a blind guy who sees the truth better than anyone else, which is just the kind of thing a Jedi would find ironically profound. His enduring impact, the world's most annoying legacy. And what a legacy it is. Kanan's sacrifice didn't just save his friends, it became the motivational poster for the rest of the show. Ezra, who up until that point was a lovable but deeply chaotic scamp, suddenly gets all serious. It's like Kanan's death was a Force. Powered, you better get your act together, young man. Speech. Ezra is now burdened with the responsibility of living up to the hero who died for him, which is a fantastic way to give a guy a permanent case of performance anxiety. His death is the spiritual fertilizer for the entire Lothal rebellion. Whenever things get tough, someone just has to say, "Remember Kanan?" and everyone gets a sudden surge of heroic energy. It's like he died and became the galaxy's most effective motivational speaker. His face is painted on murals, his name is spoken with reverence, and his final moment of epic sacrifice is probably played on a loop at every rebel briefing. He didn't just save his friends, he gave them a narrative, a purpose, and a permanent, unshakable emotional hook. The rebellion might have been built on hope, but Kanan's sacrifice was its foundation. In the end, Kanan Jarrus' story is the perfect blend of epic heroism and cosmic comedy. He was a guy who survived Order 66, ran away from his problems, and then, at the end of the day, decided to be the biggest hero of all in the most extra way possible. He became a better Jedi after being blinded, a better mentor by dying for his student, and a better inspiration by leaving the galaxy forever. His legacy is a testament to the fact that you can run from your past, but eventually, it will catch up to you. Force, push a giant exploding fuel tank, and make you a legend. And honestly, you have to laugh at that. And so, we arrive at the final, most profound chapter of Kanan Jarrus' story, a legacy that transcended his physical existence and became a guiding light for a galaxy in need. We've seen him as a tormented survivor, a reluctant mentor, and a hilarious but epic sacrificial hero. Now, we'll see how his influence, like the Force itself, continues to resonate long after his final, explosive goodbye. This is Kanan's unseen influence, and it's where his legend truly begins. Whispers in the Force, the ghost who wasn't spooky. You'd think a guy who went out in a blaze of glory would just, peace out. But Kanan, he's too dedicated for that. After his big, fiery exit, he basically became the galaxy's most helpful Force ghost. He didn't just haunt the Ghost crew, he was their spiritual wingman. Think about it. Ezra, the kid who was basically a walking Force-powered chaos magnet, suddenly starts getting wise. Is it a sudden burst of maturity? Nah. It's Kanan, whispering in his ear from the great beyond. Hey kid, maybe don't jump off that cliff this time. Trust the Force. Also, get a haircut. He's the invisible co-pilot, the silent alarm system, the ultimate, what would Kanan do? Guide for the entire crew. He's the little voice in Hera's head telling her to keep flying, the presence Zeb feels when he's feeling down, and the gentle reminder to Sabine that friendship is a beautiful thing. He's not just a memory, he's a palpable presence, a permanent part of their Force, sensitive, but not Jedi family. He proves that a Jedi's influence isn't tied to a lightsaber or a Jedi temple, but to the bonds of love and loyalty forged in battle. A new generation, Kanan's Jedi school, but with way more explosions. For centuries, the Jedi were a formal institution, passing down their knowledge in a grand temple with marble floors and ancient holocrons. Kanan's legacy flipped that whole idea on its head. He didn't teach Ezra in a classroom. He taught him in the cockpit of a freighter, on the back of a speeder bike, and in the middle of Imperial ambushes. He didn't just teach the Jedi Code. He taught Ezra how to survive, how to trust, and how to be a hero on his own terms. And that's his true legacy. He didn't rebuild the Jedi Order. He inspired a new generation of Force users who operate outside the rigid confines of the old ways. Ezra and Ahsoka, both products of the Kanan School of Jediing, it's a very exclusive, very dangerous school, embody a new kind of heroism. One that is pragmatic, compassionate, and deeply personal. They're not fighting for an institution, they're fighting for people, for the individuals and communities the Empire has crushed. Kanan's story is a living testament to the idea that a Jedi is not defined by a title, but by their actions. He may have been the last Padawan, but in his death, he became a beacon for the first Jedi of a new era. A symbol of a brighter, more decentralized, and frankly, much more interesting future for the Force, beyond the screen. Why? We still can't get over this guy. So, why does Kanan Jarrus' story resonate so deeply with fans, even today? Is it because of the epic battles? The sarcastic quips? The dramatic sacrifice? Yes, to all of the above. But it's more than that. Kanan's journey is a microcosm of our own. He was a guy who was traumatized by his past, who ran from his identity, and who had to find the courage to face his fears and become a better person. His story reminds us that it's okay to be flawed. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to not have all the answers. Kanan was a Jedi, but he was also just a guy trying to get by. He had a temper, he made mistakes, and he was constantly wrestling with his own inner demons. But in his moments of weakness, he found strength. In his moments of doubt, he found faith. He taught us that true strength isn't about being invincible. It's about being vulnerable enough to trust others, to open your heart, and to make the ultimate sacrifice for the people you love. His journey from a scared boy named Caleb Dume to a selfless hero named Kanan Jarrus is a powerful narrative about resilience, redemption, and the enduring power of hope. It's why we still talk about him. It's why we still miss him. And it's why his legend, a quiet, hilarious, and profoundly moving legend, will live on forever.